Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Healthy Muslim in Ramadan. I want to talk today about my favorite subject, one of my favorite subjects, which is food. In Ramadan, food becomes really important to you. And I want to show the ways in which, through Ramadan, you will really learn the value of food in all its complexity. What is food? We have a very complex relationship with it. And because in the affluent West, food is available at all times, throughout the day, throughout the night, we are rather casual and eat what we want when we want, without being terribly conscious that food is a very special fuel to allow your body to work healthily. You would not put diesel in a Ferrari, not unless you want it to run properly. Equally, we should be really intelligent about how we eat and exactly what we eat and when we eat it. It's tragic that in the world today, 25% of people have food insecurity. They don't know when their next meal is coming from. And yet there's an obesity epidemic. I had a lovely friend who spent part of every year in Tibet on an ashram. And on an ashram, she could live on £1 a day. And the food they ate was very simple: local vegetables, local herbs, and they ate very little. And she was completely happy. And in a situation where you're removed from humankind, you're meditating, praying, and so on, you become very aware when you return to civilization exactly how strange the rest of us are. She was reminded of that when she came to an airport and saw this child, teenager, who was extremely overweight, wearing outsized trainers with some sort of tracksuit that was too big for him, hardly able to walk because of his weight, with a transistor radio that was blasting noise to disturb everybody around him. And he was barely able to move. He waddled. And she thought how sad this was, that this child was clearly loved in that somebody had bothered to feed him excessively, but they hadn't fed him intelligently. So our relationship to food starts extremely early in our life. And we mustn't mistake food as a sign, an excess of food, as a sign of love. We must learn that food is a fuel to maintain that most precious thing we have, which is our body. I've reminded you that it's clear in Quran. Eat and drink, but not to excess. In Surah Al-Baqarah, do not cast yourself into destruction by your own hands. It's up to you how you care for yourself. I was amazed the number of hadith I found on food and eating, and I'll just give you a glimpse of some of them, because I think there must be hadith books on nothing but the hadith literature on food. There are so many. But clearly this was something that the companions and those after the companions felt was extremely important, and it's something that 21st century man has totally forgotten. If you did not have that, it would be better for you. That was the Prophet tapping the belly on a rather large man. Clearly he meant the food you had excessively consumed would have done better for a hungry man. Interestingly, he didn't say the same thing to women. He understood that women's hormonal problems make them more likely to gain weight at times like childbearing and so on. So he was very gentle relatively with them, but he was quite strict with men. Another hadith, overeating does not go with good health, and avoid filling the stomach with food and drink. Overeating exhausts the body and causes illnesses. Indeed it does. Another one, follow a middle way in eating and drinking, as this improves the bodies. Allah does not like fat bodies. The son of Adam fills no container worse than his stomach. Let him have just a few mouthfuls to strengthen his limbs. Now, what's interesting about this, the latest treatment for excessive obesity is a very special operation where the size of the stomach is reduced to something extremely small. And as a consequence of that, all you can eat at any one time is 7 to 10 mouthfuls. And yet we have it in hadith. They knew that all those years ago. Another hadith, 1/3 stomach for food, 1/3 for drink, and 1/3 for air. It was very clever in those days. They ate sitting down. Now, if you're sitting down and leaning forward to get the food from the plates that are arrayed in front of you, of course you're squeezing your stomach, so you can't fit so much in it. People who are sitting at a table in a chair like the one I'm sitting in now, you have much better stomach drainage, and I'm afraid it's easier to overfill your stomach. So don't wait to feel full. Be intelligent about what you're eating. Another hadith, do not kill your hearts by eating and drinking too much, for the heart is like a sown field. Over-irrigation causes the seed to rot. I would need a scholar to tell me, but I think this is referring to the spiritual heart as much as it is to the physical body. The Caliph Umar said, avoid getting a pot belly, for it spoils the body, causes diseases, and makes doing the prayer tiring. And avoid all excess, for God hates a learned man who is fat. You've got no excuse if you're educated. And it's clear that in 21st century, educated man, Western man, is self-indulgent. This is across the border in all Western cultures and in the Middle East. It fascinates me that the early doctors were equally on message. There was an important doctor called Harith ibn Halada, known as the physician to the Arabs. And he asked himself, what is the best medicine? The answer was hunger. For what disease? The entry of food upon food. So he was saying, you must be hungry before you eat food. Don't just eat food and eat some more because you want it. Wait until you're hungry. Ibn Sina, known as Avicenna, amazing guy. He said, never have a meal until the one before has been ingested. Avoid salt. I'm not sure about that, but it's true for hypertensives. And avoid fatty meat. That's interesting too, given how we're all worried, all the affluent Western people are worried about their cholesterol. And he emphasized the value of vegetables. Ibn Khaldun said, know that hunger is better for health than eating too much. Even if we cannot remain hungry, and you can't cope with being hungry, we're also weak. Just eat less when you do eat, even if you can't wait for hunger. He also said eating less is better for the development of the body and mind. We know this now. There's lots of experiments on lean rats versus potentially obese rats. And the rats that are fed less live longer, are more intelligent, they learn their way around complex mazes faster than the fat rats, and they're in general happier because their whiskers twitch more, and the fat rats sit miserable in the corner of their cage. So, according to the rat language, it's a really good idea to stay thin. It might be true for humans too. What about modern doctors? We're not much good. I'm sorry about that. I'm actually fascinated by nutrition, but I think I'm very rare. In the British National Health Service, it doesn't have a very high place in your assessment by your doctor. He will give you some chart saying lose weight, but he won't actually help you about how to do it. The simplicity of eating not more than 10 mouthfuls and having 5 small meals a day of 5 to 10 mouthfuls, which is what happens to people who've had a partial gastrectomy as a treatment for obesity. It's strange that that can't be achieved with virtual dieting. I call it virtual dieting because I say to people who are planning surgery, this is how it's going to be to you after surgery, so why don't you just eat less? Well, the interesting thing is they can't. But when they have their surgery, there's an important hormone in the wall of the stomach called leptin. And when you remove that hormone, physically you can't eat more than 10 mouthfuls, but if you wanted to, you could liquidize Haagen-Dazs ice cream and eat that all day. But they don't want to. They are genuinely not hungry. So overeating develops a hormone in the stomach, which then makes you overeat some more. And it's called the wages of sin, which is to want to sin more. And it doesn't matter which of the vices you're talking about. At the end of one sin, there is a little devil in your head that says, do it again, but do it twice, and 3 times, and more. And in terms of food, the body imprints that in your stomach in the form of leptin. But you can diet consciously. I want to talk later, after the break, about exactly what food is made up of and why we eat it. Thank you. Do come back. Welcome back. It's important now to concentrate on not just the pleasure of food, to be eaten in a rich banquet with no limit, but to think of what food is intelligently. Food is necessary to maintain your body temperature. So food is burned as a fuel, like wood is. You know this because dead bodies are cold, and we maintain our body temperature above the environment. When you fast, the first thing you realize, your hands and feet are icy cold. And one of the things you're grateful for very soon after breaking your fast is that finally your feet can be warmer. Maybe those of you who are listening in the Middle East may not know this, but some of us who fast during the winter when there's snow outside, I promise you, we're cold by the end of the day. But apart from the calories, which we need on a daily basis to keep us warm, and we need as a fuel for our energy during the day, we have to also know what are we going to do for the day. If you're given your car, you drive it. How far are you going to drive it? You will need fuel for the car, petrol for the car, depending on where you're going to go. You might want to go from London to Scotland, in which case you'll probably use the whole of your tank of fuel. Or you might, if you've got a small car, need to stop on the way to have a break and get some more fuel in it. If you're just going to go round the corner, you're not going to use up the fuel. So you've got to intelligently know what you're going to do with your day. part of this is also knowing what is your physical capacity. In sports medicine, we're very good at adjusting food for athletes. Daley Thompson was one of our greatest athletes, and he did a number of different disciplines, and he consumed 6,500 calories a day. If I did that for a year, I would probably weigh 180 kilos, because even in my wildest dreams, I don't have the physical strength to consume 6,500 calories a day. I'm not that strong. You have to be very strong to put out that calories. That is Ferrari pace. I'm a little old Ford. So as a female, females put out less calories than men, roughly half, no, maybe a little bit more than that. But if you're sitting with your husband, do not match him for what he's eating, because you need less. But you have to know, by weighing yourself regularly, how much food you need through the day. If you eat too much, you get fat. If you eat too little, you lose weight. Simple. But food is not just to maintain body weight, to give calories, to give energy, to make you exercise, or to give fuel for your exercise. It's also nutrition. Nutrition is something more subtle than energy. Energy is immediate. Nutrition is long-lasting. And nutritional balance is absolutely essential for a healthy body. Nutritional balance is absolutely necessary for healthy tissues. Each part of your body needs something different. The brain needs one set of nutrition, the blood another, the skin yet another, and maintaining balance is essential. Later on, I'll be discussing this in great detail, using as an example the food that was available to the Prophet and to the companions, because they really understood it. Modern man does not. I remember going to the funeral of a very dear man in Nigeria, and I went to his village, which was Ilara Mokin in chocolate growing country, and I was absolutely charmed and fascinated. And I saw this expanse of terracotta earth, houses made of wood, two-story houses, very intricately decorated, and I really felt a harmony of man living within his natural environment, because the jungle, the forest, was very close to them. And pigs and goats and chickens were running around all over the place. And I said to one of the sisters, who owns all of these animals? And she explained, well, some belong to one person, some to another. So I said, well, how do you know which one is which? And she looked at me in absolute horror and said, but you know your own chicken. I'm afraid I don't. Mine comes wrapped up in cellophane in Sainsbury's. That's how far, in 21st century, we've completely lost touch with the natural way by which we use the provisions of life, the living creatures and the living plants that are to our benefit. It's really sad. And we eat increasingly processed food where we actually don't know what's in it. And we're unconscious, unthinking. And yet we're meant to be evolved, intelligent people. So it actually is something of great benefit to anyone out there listening. Please go back to the time of the Prophet and the companions and the early Muslims. They had rich understanding of the value of food and nutrition, which has been lost by 21st century man. So here we are in the dark ages again, having evolved to trying to learn what our ancestors and forebears knew only too well, but we're having to relearn all of it. What is the nutritional benefit of food? What should we eat and when? When you're fasting, there are two things you've got to think of. At iftar, you want sugar and you want sugar fast, but you don't want too much of it, as I explained, because you'll go to sleep. At suhoor, you've got to plan ahead. What are you going to do for your day? You're going to go driving and you're going to need petrol in your tank. There's no point putting 1/4 of a litre of petrol when you're intending to drive from London to Scotland. You're not going to get there. You're going to crash and burn, and there are no petrol stations open today because it's Ramadan and you're fasting, so you won't be able to get through the day. So intelligently, you have to think, what was I doing at iftar? What was I doing in order to know what to eat? And at suhoor, what am I going to do in order to know what to eat at that time? Now, I got to give you an idea. I want to discuss what the components of food are. We've already discussed protein, carbohydrates, and salt as being integral things to keep the water in your body. Now I'm not bothered so much about the water, which is kind of following on. What I'm bothered about is how you're going to pace your evening and how you're going to pace tomorrow. In his daily life, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't eat much. In the morning, after Fajr, and after gathering with the companions, some teachings, some discussions of the matters of the day, he would return home and he would ask Aisha, is there any food? And sometimes they didn't have food. They didn't have food every day. It wasn't one of those normal, natural things. And if there was a day where there was no food, he said, today I'll be fasting. So he made his niyat at that point to fast. And he was able to get through the day. The important thing about us is to understand really clearly what we need to eat for what we're going to do for the rest of the evening. If at iftar you've got kids, you've got to put them to bed, you're going to eat one thing. If you're going to go to the mosque and you're going to be praying for a long time, you'll eat something else. We will be discussing this in great detail, so you've got to come back. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.